Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for having me.
When you do stuff with UNLV, how does that work collaboratively? Because they don't know a ton. You're obviously very advanced with your skill level. So
Yeah, I mean, it happens a few different ways. Usually, department heads are kind of brought in as the professional kind of guest lecturers, if you will, and then so we kind of provide our insights on our specific departments. And so, like for me specifically, I'll ask to bring in like a few other kind of head creatives like a gaffer or like a first AC, like someone that's worked with my camera package before, someone that like knows my workflow and is familiar with all of the gear. So then that way I can kind of focus on the creative while also, you know, teaching the students at the same time. So it's not like I'm having to bounce back and forth between helping out the G&E side, but also camera department, but also working with the director. So that way my first that I bring in is also usually a professional. So they would have much more insight in terms of professional workflows from a camera assistant perspective. So they're able to transcend a lot of that knowledge to the students. And so it kind of alleviates the dependence on learning from me, especially like when I get in the thick of it and we're like shooting and we're on a tight schedule, like things move pretty quick. And so it's difficult when you're trying to also make your day, but also teach students kind of in a in a patient way. I guess the best way I could describe it.
sure, yeah, because I mean, film sets in general are already so hectic. You're trying to make every
Yeah,
shot.
they're
It's
already
like, by the way, I also have to teach you what's happening right now.
right. So I think the way, I mean, there's a couple different ways we can approach it. And so, you know, obviously with it kind of being a student kind of driven project, you know, there are ways that we can kind of hand over the reins, like, you know, having our first AC let some of the other ACs in camera department pull and stuff like that. So, and even having maybe other people operate too. So
Okay.
there are a couple different ways that we can kind of help alleviate that. But yeah, it's definitely helpful when I have a lot of other kind of industry professionals kind of helping that front.
Yeah, it's a lot. You went to UNLV Film?
Yep.
Did you have anything like this when you were there, where pros
Yeah,
were coming back?
we had something similar. We had the advanced directing. That was actually the first time that I ever met Drea, the director. She was actually brought in as a guest for the advanced directing class, so she was the guest director, and so that was kind of my first exposure to her. I always thought it was really, really insightful because in those classes it was cool because we're working with these industry professionals, and it's like we looked up to these people, and it's like, oh wow, these people are like actually doing it, like they're doing the thing on a very high level. So it's like, it's weird to think that like now I'm kind of being put on that pedestal because like for me, I feel like film school was like, you know, a year, you know, it was like it's so long ago, but also at the same time it really wasn't. So it's you know, it's kind of that one of those full circle moments, but it's really, really cool because I always enjoy going back to UNLV because a lot of those students are super passionate and super just excited about storytelling, and it's cool to just be able to push that.
Yeah, they still have the fire for sure.
Yeah, totally.
It hasn't been diminished yet.
They haven't been wiped away by the sad reality of the film industry. So yeah, that innocence is still very much honest and pure.
Yeah.
If you will.
Going back a little further, before UNLV, what was your start getting into film? Like, how did you get into all of this?
Yeah, so like I kind of came up during the DSLR video wave of things. So like my first camera was a T1i. It was a Rebel. It was like a very consumer camera. So like alongside that release, Canon released the 5D Mark II, which a lot of you know that is one of the first DSLRs that included video. And so like now all of a sudden people had access to what was essentially large format video, shallow depth of field, interchangeable lenses for a few $1,000s, which was, I mean, unheard of at the time. Like at the time, you had people that were using camcorders and had adapters on the front to get that shallow depth of field, but now it just kind of made it that quote unquote cinematic look just kind of widely available. So I kind of came up on that wave. My first camera was a T1i. It was basically the consumer, very, very entry level consumer version of that camera. And so it did have video. The video specs like were just god awful, but because I came up through stills photography. So like I was always taking pictures in high school. I was always interested in just documenting life. So like I always had a camera around my neck, and then eventually started playing around a lot more with video and became a lot more interested in video. And then throughout kind of my college years, I kind of started to let go of photography. I still do it on a personal level, just for fun. But I started to let go of photography because it was very, in a lot of ways, kind of lone wolf style. So what I really enjoyed about film and video production is that it was very collaborative. And so you got to work with people who are way better at their job than you are at their job. So once you surround yourself with those kinds of people, it just makes the end product so much better. Whereas in the stills world, like a lot of it is kind of driven, like you're basically the director, like you're a director DP kind of in a sense, like you're very much so steering the ship. And like that's super cool and great, but like that's a lot of, in my opinion, that's a lot of workload. And some people do it really well, but that's kind of why I gravitated towards film and video.
Okay. Were you doing any work in high school, or was this just the photo era for you? Or were you starting to like try to charge to, or even just do free projects
I
and
did,
stuff?
yeah, I did a handful of projects for like parents and stuff like that. So like as a senior in high school, like obviously a lot of the parents, they know a lot of the kids that are going into school. So like every now and then I would get kind of hired by parents to do random things, shoot weddings and stuff like that. Even then, it wasn't for very much. But it was like a very, very early exposure to like direct to client work. And so that kind of persisted throughout college and just kind of began to grow. And then as that kind of grew, once I got out of college, now it's a little less direct to client work and more so stuff on the production side. But even now, in today's day and age, I feel like that's kind of flipped. It's like I feel like I'm almost going back to direct to client work as a, I'm starting to do more content creator style jobs just because the state of the industry is been pretty, the best I could describe as bleak. So it's almost kind of pivoting back to doing some more of direct to client jobs. Throughout my time at UNLV, I wasn't really super involved in the film program now that thinking back, because I was kind of just so much focused on doing my own work and doing paid work for clients and coming up that way. So it wasn't until my senior year of UNLV that I kind of became much more involved with, all the festivals that were, the Spring Flicks and all the other student projects that were going around.
What made you did you go to college thinking I'm going to be in the film program, or did you kind of figure it out once you enrolled?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of knew right out the gate that I kind of knew that this is what I wanted to do. And I knew I wanted to be in the camera department in some way or another. And I definitely knew that whatever my path ended up being, that I wanted to involve a camera somehow. So I was really, really fortunate that I've kind of found this like really, really early on, whereas some of my colleagues, some of my friends, they don't find it until their early mid 20s. And so I definitely, especially, considering that I just had a huge leg up when I just thinking back to high school, it's like I had a huge just head start and just in terms of visual storytelling. And so definitely having that background in stills and just knowing how to compose and just framing just, I think, really, really helped early on.
Do you think when you were in college and you were doing the paid jobs, also going to school, did you get more out of doing your direct to client work in terms of learning experience, or was it kind of a mix? Or
Yeah, it's a good question. I definitely think it helped. It definitely interfered, and like that's the one thing that they tell you in film school, like in all of your syllabi, it's like there's very explicitly stated. It's like You are like, if you are hired for a job, you are not going to be excused for if you miss class. Basically, so basically, you need to show up to class, and so and like we all accepted that for what it was, towards the end, it sort of, I'm not going to say it got annoying, but like it got, there was definitely a lot of pressure because in my last few years, it was like, okay, well, I had to choose between going to class, like, and not even just a film specific class. It could have been like one of the final gen ed classes that I was kind of required courses that I was wrapping up. It's like I had to choose between going to that class and missing that class or like making rent for that month. And I was like, ugh. So it's like, I'm so excited just to like not have this pressure anymore. So it definitely gets a little bit stressful, but at the same time, kind of in the same way that starting in visual storytelling at such a young age kind of gave me a head start. I think that also gave me a head start just doing all my direct-to-client work throughout film school, because it's like, one, I'm doing paid work, and two, it's just kind of another way of cutting my teeth with something that's not kind of necessarily student related. And then with that, it's like, okay, like now I'm starting to accumulate a fair amount of gear, and like a lot of people that I'm graduating with, it's like, okay, they might have a camera, they might have like a light or two, but usually we're like checking stuff out from the film department. So it's like being able to come out of film school but already have a pretty substantial kit was also like super helpful. Not that gear is the end all be all, but it definitely helped when doing a lot of direct to client work.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it way easier, especially starting, if you can walk into your garage and there's tools for you to practice and tools for you to try stuff. And
Yeah, especially at that in that era too, is because like a lot of the jobs you're probably doing are small jobs, and so for a lot of small jobs, having gear is pretty worth it in my opinion, because you're able to bring that gear on and then get a little bit extra money for that, and then at some point that's just going to be pure profit. So especially at that stage when you're doing small jobs, I think having gear definitely helps, because it's like not like you have to ship something in or go pick it up from a rental house. It's like if it's a small enough job, like a simple interview, 2-camera interview, then having gear I think is definitely worth it.
yeah, I mean, 100%. I think when you can show up and know that you're covered and not have those like panic moments, especially at the beginning where you're like trying to rent and put the package together and you get to the job and you're like, oh my gosh, we don't have whatever it is. And then like that job just became 100x more stressful
Yeah.
than if I just pulled up in my car and I had my 2-camera
Yeah.
lighting kit.
And especially too, like in the smaller jobs, like that's kind of where you want to make the mistakes of forgetting stuff too, because at the end of the day, like those jobs are I don't want to say low risk if they're paid jobs, but like, you don't want to be making the same mistakes when you get into $250,000 shows or stuff like that.
Yeah, the ones that you definitely want calling you back.
Yeah, exactly. So it's definitely worth making those mistakes and kind of knowing what you need. And then after a certain amount of them, you're just going to automatically know like the back of your hand. It's like, okay, I need this, 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 this. And then there's all sort of processes that you can kind of develop and set so that, every shoot you're not forgetting your lens case or you're not like forgetting stingers or stuff like that. So
Yeah. On your smaller direct to client stuff when you were starting, were you doing everything, just producer, shooter, editor, delivery?
yeah, basically, I would generally get some sort of idea of creative from the client, and then it would just be it would be simple enough to where I could kind of manage it on my own and kind of not necessarily direct, because I would still kind of lean on the client to kind of produce/direct, but I would basically just be in charge of everything from lighting, camera, and audio, which we've all been there and we've all done the one-man band stuff, and to a point it's relatively simple to manage, but like once you reach a certain scale, it's just like there's no way that I can just do all this on my own. So yeah, it's definitely way easier like when you're first starting out and you're doing the like micro level kind of small jobs where it's like super dead simple. And also too, like, the those clients, their budgets usually aren't super huge. So it's like those same clients usually, I don't want to say have a lower expectation, but like a lot of times the bar is usually low. So like, despite you not having a specific light or as many lights or, whatever. If even though that you might be limited in terms of equipment, their bar might be differently calibrated than yours. So it's like whatever you kind of produce is going to look amazing to them. It's going to certainly be better than their iPhone. So, yeah, just managing expectations in that way is also super helpful.
Yeah. And so when you were you're doing the jobs in college, you're coming out, what was the draw to cinematography? Was it a natural progression, or were you like, I'm going to be a cinematographer now?
Yeah, I mean, it was always, again, I think it was always kind of known for me that I definitely wanted to be behind a camera in some way or another. So, like, I loved operating. Like, I wanted to be an operator. For a very large chunk of time, like, I wanted to be a Steadicam operator, actually. And, but I think it was just more so crafting. Like, for me, what does it is, like, just that ability of just being able to craft an image and like being super proud of it and like knowing that like it took a whole team to like put this frame together and everything from wardrobe, makeup, lighting, camera. Like I love how collaborative this industry is, and yeah, I think that's what really does it for me, is just being super proud of, at the end of the day, watching the dailies and be like, oh, that's super cool, we did that.
Yeah.
So
When you think about all your experiences, especially where you're at now, and then you go back to film school, if you would to do it over again, would you go back through that process, or do you think you would go a
yeah,
different way?
that's also a really great question, because I think for me the main thing that I got out of film school was my cinematography mentor, and he no longer teaches at UNLV. And so I think it just depends on, there's like so many variables that go into it. It really depends on like who your mentor is. And that's always the one piece of advice that I'm giving to people is like, you always want to find a mentor, and not only a mentor, but like a mentor who you feel has good taste. Because I think at the end of the day that like, that's what we get hired for essentially, is our taste as visual storytellers. And so it's tough to be able to answer that question, because like if it was 10 years ago, sure, maybe I probably, because I mean, again, that's what I got out of it. But if I were to go through film school now, and it's like I could have a completely, totally different experience than what I did 10 years ago. So, and at the same time too, it's like, not only is camera technology super vast and available and just readily available for anyone to pick up, but also so is the information. And so the way that we're learning is changing, so we kind of have to change with it. Even 5 years ago, there wasn't this amount of readily available information on the internet that you could find, because I think that was one of the big reasons that I started a YouTube channel, is because I really wasn't happy with the quality of information that was being put out at the time. But like, you think about the information that's being put out now, and it's like night and day. Like really, really good information that's just on YouTube, on cinematography, filmmaking, editing, literally anything you are interested in, there's usually some sort of info on.
Yeah, I mean, I think with everything that's getting put on YouTube, now YouTube is so popular, creators had to start giving some really good value to make their channels grow. Because if you were just giving super basic whatever, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, you would get away with it because there was not enough. But now you have channels like yours and all these professionals that are giving the behind the scenes insights of here's how I made this image. And it's almost a competition of who can give more value for free.
Yeah, and like exactly to your point, like 5 years ago, like that information would have been super valuable. But like now everybody knows that information. Now that's like, it's almost like a lot of concepts now are common knowledge, which is super cool. And, I'm not really one to gatekeep, but it's to your point, become in a way a competition. And it's the same thing that social media is struggling with. And it's like, we're always having, as creatives, find new ways of innovating and storytelling to just keep audience retention up. and it's become very competitive, and YouTube and social media just in general has really kind of just leveled the playing field.
Social media is super interesting, and I'm curious what you think about this because, like, my production company works with we do a lot of B2C stuff. So we're working direct client, and reels are obviously very popular because everyone sits on their phone and scrolls reels. And we have clients that call and they say, first 3 seconds has got to be dialed. Like, we spend more time on the first 3 seconds of an edit than we spend on the other 30 seconds.
Totally.
So for you as a storyteller, because I know, like, when you watch a movie, it's structured in a way of, like, here's the premise and the build up, and then you have the climax and resolution. But on social media, you almost have to hit the most important point or the best look in the first 3 seconds of visual. So how does that affect your work? Because a lot of the stuff you make ends up on Instagram or TikTok or wherever.
Yeah, I mean, it's super interesting, and it kind of goes differently depending on which perspective you're looking at it from. So for me as a creator, like, I've been taking a lot of notes and just learning a lot about social media lately, just because starting actually with this from this year, I've started to kind of push my social media outlets a lot more, just because I've kind of really undervalued it as a sort of marketing tool. And so, like, even last week, I did a a quick lighting breakdown on my Instagram via a reel. And so I've been doing a lot of studying on terms of how a lot of the social structures and formats are kind of formulated. And so the thing with social media and YouTube is that, like, you always kind of want to lead with what's called an unclosed loop or a curiosity gap. So it's like, we as human beings, like, we always need closure on something. So if you're always kind of dangling this carrot on a stick for your audience, it's like, that's kind of what helps keep viewer retention going. And so it was interesting because the reel that I put out, it was like this kind of, I was like, oh, I'll just do like a quick, like, behind the scenes reel since I'm trying to do social media more. So I did this reel, and it was like the most viewed reel that I've ever done. And it wasn't a lot of views, like, in the grand scheme of things, but there's a metric there that says, we're pushing this reel out because people are staying past the first 3 seconds. So that's why the first 3 seconds are so valuable, is because when you keep them engaged past the first 3 seconds, then Instagram will actually serve it out and
Okay.
get you more impressions and thus for more views. So yeah, it's super interesting, all the different, like, retention techniques there are, and there's literally, like, a formula to it. And so that's kind of what I've been really kind of focusing on this year in terms of how I approach my own content differently. So it and a lot of it does kind of come down to editing too. A lot of amazing things are being put on Instagram these days, and it's, like I said, it's become super difficult just to even keep up with everyone else. But by just even having a formula and by having a certain structure to follow, that's kind of made it a lot easier in terms of not guessing if this will kind of perform well. So now it gives me, and even for my YouTube content, it's given me a lot more guidance in terms of, okay, how do I want to structure this video? How do I make this, like, not super boring and just talking about a global shutter sensor? And so, like, how do I, again, keep audience retention up? So yeah, it's a whole, I think the rise of social media has been just absolutely astounding. Like, I think Instagram has, like, taken over the world. And social media just in general has taken over the world. And so, again, going back to a lot of these direct-to-client content creator style jobs, it's like, okay, well, there's not really a lot of production work going on. So it's like, I'm kind of having to pivot. And so me being a creator and kind of having my own brand, it's like, it kind of also helps knowing how the algorithm works. And so that way it kind of transcends down to my other clients in terms of Reels performance and social media engagement.
Sure. I mean, that's such an interesting value proposition you have, because you can literally say, look at what I do, and I have this following and all. Because I think in our industry, you have a large following, like, relative to how many people actually pay attention to film videos, and you're growing really fast. And for a client that says, I want to grow on YouTube or I want to grow on Instagram, for you to pull out your phone and be like, well, I grow, so I can do that for you. That's such a
Yeah.
powerful
It's
marketing
it's
tool.
super interesting just because like you're able to test all of these different metrics on your own, and you're able to test all these different strategies on your own platform. And so a lot of the other kind of filmmaking niche creators that I follow, super active on social media. And so it's like just having a base level of understanding of how social media works has been super powerful. And to be honest, a lot of the recent jobs I've done just this year have been specifically reels focused. So knowing how to kind of shoot for that, and again, a lot of it does kind of come down, probably I would say half of it comes down to the editing, honestly, because people's attention spans are so short. So it's like and same goes for YouTube. Like YouTube, it's kind of within that first 7 seconds, like you have to hook them. And a lot of times, like I'll spend at least 60 to 70% of my time working on the intro of a video, as opposed to the whole
The
other,
bulk of it, yeah.
90% of it. So it's like really focusing on either the first 3 seconds, the first 7 seconds has been really important. And just front loading, just having that front load stimulus kind of really helps with kind of viewer engagement.
I remember I shot some BTS for your YouTube like several years ago, and you've grown a lot. As far as social media and YouTube as a marketing tool, how are you seeing it help you get new work? Do people find you off of your YouTube? Because you are presented and are an expert in the field. And when you're educating people, I think clients can look at that and say, hey, he knows what he's talking about. Has that helped you as a marketing piece?
Yeah, totally. People know me as the DP from Las Vegas. And so obviously there's a lot of work that comes in and out of Las Vegas. So it's like whenever, and like me being in a particularly niche industry, those people that are either producing jobs or fielding jobs that are coming through Las Vegas, like, oh, I know a DP that's in Vegas. It's like, oh, this guy has a lot of gear. Maybe we can rent through him. And so it's definitely been helpful just being associated with Las Vegas. And Las Vegas is generally a pretty small market too. It's a pretty small town. So like everyone knows each other. People will either know me and hit me up for a job and be like, okay, yeah, like we don't really need to brief you because like we've seen your videos. We know that you know what you're talking about. So it's like a lot of that, I guess, unfamiliarity is gone. And so it kind of develops another layer of trust, if you will.
Sure.
Because obviously I'm just talking about cameras or lighting all day on YouTube. So, I hopefully know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think there's this new, maybe not new, but the form of marketing now, especially for freelancers, is having this personal brand, this personal identity. So when you have the YouTube and you have your Instagram, that is like a personal brand. Like you said, they watch your stuff like, oh, this is all he talks about on his channel. He's clearly the guy. Like we don't have to go through all these steps of vetting and things like that,
Exactly.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and like once you start spewing off like, like the science of how things work, it's like, okay, like this guy gets it, blah blah, like we're good. And as a matter of fact, I have a job, big corporate job next week with Google, and I'm 90% certain that they might have found me on YouTube. So again, like I don't get a huge wave of jobs off of YouTube, but I definitely get a considerable amount of work just from people passing through.
Does it take you a long time to curate your videos and create them, or what's that process look like for you?
Yeah, so it used to be pretty kind of turnkey and pretty quick. Like I would, take a day to script it out, take a day to shoot and edit it. So like it used to take me like 2-3 days, maybe a day of filming B-roll. But now, like I said, I've spent a considerable amount of time researching and just studying the algorithm and what the audience kind of prefers. And it's really just knowing the psychology of the click. So it's like all of YouTube is just knowing what people want to click on. And it's really interesting just how psychology driven YouTube is and just using it as a marketing tool. But so now it takes me, I would probably say maybe 5 to 7 days to script out a video because I'm really spending a considerable more amount of time on just looking at the flow of things, and then obviously it'll take me still about a day to shoot it. If I need to like B-roll, if it's like a gear review, I'll spend like a day in the studio and just kind of shoot it out. But then the editing too, also that takes even longer because, like I said, like I think just being able to present everything in kind of a I guess flashy kind of fashion, because it's like you really want to front load a lot of that stimulus, and you really want viewers engaged and keep viewer retention up. So it's like finding ways of just not dragging things out and kind of really cutting out the bloat really, really helps. So now I'm just spending a lot more time on editing. So like I would say like a really, like for instance, the last video I put out, it was like on the Sony A9. Like that took me probably three or so weeks.
Okay. Are you doing everything by yourself?
Yeah, it's all me.
Okay.
And you know, I've considered having an editor, but it's tough because it's like this is something that I've kind of curated, you know, for a while, and it's like I like to think that I have like a kind of specific style, and even now that style is changing. So it's like it's hard to be able to delegate that to someone else and give that kind of responsibility to someone else. And it's definitely something that I'm open to, but I don't think I've just found someone to take that on just quite yet.
Yeah, that's a really hard handoff because you want things a certain way in a certain order, and then the process of doing the notes and the feedback and getting it to the point. There's a lot of growing pain. When
Yeah,
you're
and
trying
it's
to do
like
it.
at the same time, it's like, oh man, it probably would have been faster if I just did it myself.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
At the end of it, you're like, man, I could have
Yeah.
just knocked this out.
But between all the revisions and stuff like that, but yeah, no, it's just something that I've kind of tackled on my own, and it's just kind of my own. I like to call it my art project, because it's just like something that exists in the background, and so it's tough because when work starts going, it's like really, really difficult in terms of managing. It would be really helpful to have a manager. I'll say that, because it gets really hard, difficult just managing all the different projects that are coming in, and video reviews that I'm supposed to be doing on top of managing actual work, and trying to align specific brands with shoots. You know, like if there's a specific new product that's coming out, it's like, okay, how do I integrate this in the actual shoot in a way that feels right for that project, and not just like oh, here's this new lens that I'm just going to use for the heck of it. And it's like, how do I use this new piece of tech to actually tell a story that's like appropriate for this project? And so yeah, there's a lot of different kind of variables that go into it, and it does get really hard when it gets busy. And I'll also say that like work in general has been pretty slow and dead for a lot of us. And so there was a minute where I wasn't really creating, because like I think a lot of appeal and draw to my channel is actually seeing the work. So it's like when work is slow for me, it's a double-edged sword, because like one, that gives me a lot more time to actually create videos on gear specifically, or you know, anything. But it's so I think a lot of my audience gets a lot more value when they're actually seeing it being used in the field, and seeing it actually being tested.
Yeah, it's concepts versus application. So it is. I've watched a lot of your videos, and I'm like, oh, he did this in this environment. That makes it way more appealing to me to go out and invest in a piece of equipment.
Yeah, because I think once you slap on the nomenclature of this is a paid job, I'm using this on a paid job, I think that kind of also helps generate a lot more appeal. It's like, okay, well, I know this works in a professional environment, and so obviously I'll be able to use it. And so just having that relatability is super helpful.
When you were starting out, obviously you start YouTube, you don't have any brand deals. Now you have a bunch, from what I can tell.
There's a couple.
A couple
there's,
at least.
Yeah, there's not a ton. I'm certainly not doing it as well as some of my other YouTube buddies and YouTube content creators. Certainly as well as they do, but I certainly know how to kind of navigate that now. There's kind of a way to go about it, and so like just knowing how to navigate that is super helpful. But a lot of the audience really kind of respects your honest opinion, and usually once money is exchanged, like that kind of usually changes. So it's like there's no such thing as like a paid review, is because like a brand is paying you basically to say nice things about their product. So it's like a lot of people get a little weary once they see paid reviews. And so I think the best ways to circumvent that are doing like service sponsors. So like services like audio, or services like that are just not related to the actual piece of kit that you are reviewing at all. And
Oh,
so
okay.
kind of more general, generic things that anyone can use. Like one of my big sponsors is Cord Bag. It's like everyone could use help getting organized. So it's like
Right.
that's the one that I'm usually always pushing, is because that's an easy kind of integration no matter what the video is about. And so it's always helpful when the service that you are, or service or product that you are talking about and sponsoring, is related to the actual thing that you are reviewing. So those are the kind of dream, I guess, sponsors and integrations. And so a lot of, I mean, it's nice also having a contact at a lot of these companies. So it's like, even if I did have a big video idea or anything like that, I have people that I can now reach out to and seeing if they're interested in sponsoring and putting some money behind that project.
How did those conversations start? You went from I'm making a YouTube channel. What's the conversation starter to now I'm talking to these companies that want to sponsor the videos?
Yeah, I think honestly, in my personal experience, a lot of these companies just have reached out to me. So whether that be a new product release, or if a lot of companies are interested in just promoting some of their stuff. Like a lot of people, a lot of companies and brands have reached out to me, and like there's an email on my YouTube that people can reach out to. So it's mainly that, but also being connected with from word of mouth with like a lot of my content creator friends. So it's like, if I'm not connected, I know someone that is. And so I can usually ask them for contact info for that brand that I'm looking to collaborate with,
Okay.
and usually kind of reach out that way.
When you're reaching out, does it start as a conversation of, hey, let's collaborate, and there's not an exchange of money, or is it always kind of
Yeah,
a
I mean, it's a little bit of both. Usually, if you're the one reaching out, they're willing to let you try something out for free, or not necessarily keep it, but then, just opening that line of communication and discussing a potential collaboration. That's kind of, once they see the body of work that you have, i.e., like the whole entire YouTube channel, then that's where you can start asking for like, okay, well, would you be interested in sponsoring this video, or would you be, it kind of depends. And so a lot of different brands have different budgets that they're working with. So it's like sometimes there isn't really any budget to sponsor a post or sponsor a video. And so usually more or less it's like, okay, we'll be lending you this piece of kit for X amount of time. You can use it. You can even maybe you can keep it. So it's like they have different kind of financial incentives other than pure monetary exchanges.
okay, just instead of doing like a straight cash deal on something
You're
like
like,
that?
okay,
Yeah.
yeah, we can't really afford that specific integration, but we can either lend you or give you this thing, access to a service, this product, this whatever. So it's like there are kind of different ways of just exchanging value between brands.
Okay. Does your sponsor deals carry to your Instagram and other things like that?
Sometimes, not really, just because I don't really have a huge relative to my YouTube, a huge Instagram following, but I think again, I've been focusing a lot more on my social media. So I haven't really been as present on Instagram, so not really.
Oh, okay. Are you doing TikTok or?
No TikTok. Everyone's been telling me to get into shorts though on YouTube. It's interesting when I go into the YouTube analytics. It's like people that watch regular videos, 100%, and people that also watch shorts, 100%. And so it's like I guess a lot of people are making shorts, and I've heard a lot of people find a lot of success just in terms of channel growth of using shorts. So it's not something that I've really looked into until now, just because it's like I am kind of focusing on social media a lot.
Okay.
So I'll let you know.
Yeah. Are you cutting any of your long form YouTube stuff into reels, or is it just the one?
Yeah, no, I'm mainly just focused on the long form YouTube stuff. Like sometimes I'll cut down specific sequences, but usually I'm just kind of focusing on the long form video. What I'm thinking of doing now as a strategy is like a lot of times I'll have like these ideas pop up in my head in terms of content, like, oh, that would be like a really great video idea. But I'm like, well, that's kind of a really simple concept. So it's like, now I'm thinking that would be actually a really great video idea for Instagram or for Reels, more for short form content, because it's like, I don't want to spend 3 weeks developing this whole video based on this one simple concept that could have been 30 seconds. So it's like,
Right.
now I'm kind of reshaping the way I think about kind of simpler tips and tricks and stuff like that, and kind of reforming those into social bite-sized content, which in turn helps grow. It's still growing the channel or Instagram. It's just not taking me 3 weeks to do it.
Right, yeah, but that funnel, so say you post the long form and then you have all the short stuff, it funnels you back to the long form. Because if you get a really good 20-second reel, most people, me included, would be like, oh, I got to get more information about what this guy's talking about.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've heard a lot of people using shorts now lately. It's funny because I don't really consume shorts on YouTube.
I don't either.
But like one of my just friends, not in production, he's like, oh man, I'm on shorts all the time. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like I took one day and I sat down and I scrolled through shorts, and, I found it really interesting. But again, I think Reels has a huge chokehold on the short form video formats and TikTok. But I have no presence on TikTok. I probably won't start TikTok, but it's just been really interesting in, it's like for that Instagram reel that I put out last week, I was like, I think I'm just going to make this really quick, really casual, like reel, really quick BTS reel. I ended up making a script for it, blah, 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 blah. And like, putting in, a third of the time that I would a long form video. But, again, it was like the most, I've never seen any one of my Instagram posts or Instagram reels perform like that, because now kind of studying the algorithm, studying that formula has kind of really helped in shaping the way I craft my own content.
Yeah, it's definitely the new wave, I think, is in all those short,
It's taking over the world.
20-second things. Yeah, that's all the stuff we're doing here, all the stuff we do for clients, all cut down to 20, 30-second stuff. Shifting a little bit, why, when you were coming out of school, why'd you stay in Vegas? Most people, I think, when they think of film, LA, New York, why'd you stay in Vegas?
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of the appeal was that Vegas was such a small town and small community. And this is where I was born and raised, so obviously it means a lot to me. And there were a few years where I did want to pursue something like an AFI, because I know a lot of great DPs that I follow, they kind of came through AFI and they're doing really well now. And so that was kind of loosely in the cards for a minute, but after talking with my mentor, who used to teach at UNLV, and I brought that up to him. I was like, maybe thinking about possibly applying to AFI, and he's just said, why? And it kind of took me aback, and I was like, because a lot of people I follow, they kind of came through there, and they're like, yeah, but if you're already doing well for yourself in Vegas, then why change anything? And I was like, oh, well, there's actually a bit of truth to that. And it's like, I kind of nestled in Vegas, and with it being a small community, there's a lot of work to go around. And so the cost of living in LA or California is just exorbitant. So it's like, it made sense to stay here. The cost of living is rising here, but it's definitely not what it is in California. So obviously, being the entertainment capital of the world, like I said, there's just so much work. Maybe not as much now, but even when it comes to corporate stuff and trade shows, like that stuff will always be flowing through. So there, at a base level, there will always be some need for some sort of video production. So within the past 4-ish years, like there have been thoughts of whether or not to go make the journey out to LA, even if it's just a year as like a trial run, because there were times when I've been here where I felt like I've hit a little bit of a ceiling, just because a lot of the bigger commercial jobs, I find that they're bringing crews in from LA anyway. They're bringing department heads from LA anyway. So it's like there's not really a lot of room for someone like me who's a DP here if the agency is just going to bring in an LA crew anyway. So it's like a lot of the jobs just felt like they were being outsourced. So, but now it's like with the state of the climate right now, it's just it doesn't really make a lot of sense to go out to LA for a lot of people, and a lot of people have honestly been leaving LA
Yeah.
and even leaving the film industry in general. So it's been tough on a lot of people.
Yeah, I was talking to a couple DPs in LA, and it's funny, some big DPs that work a lot of commercials, or they used to do the high ticket music videos. They've told me this year we've worked 1 day, 2 days in LA. I travel every day. Like I'm traveling every week to go to Utah, to Vegas, to some other random place to shoot. So definitely a big changing market. When you were talking about potentially going AFI, was that because you were seeking some like narrative kind of dream, like the ASC narrative?
Yeah, I
Wanted to get
mean,
into that world?
I think a lot of it, honestly, and this was the whole reason for me, the big reason for me to going to film school in the first place was networking. So it's like, at that point, you're going to be networking with a lot of people who are, who want to be doing the thing at a very high level. So it's like I wanted to be kind of connected with a lot of those people. But it's interesting because like I've even known a few people that have come out of AFI and they're just not really doing anything film related in general. So it's like, does it really make sense to tack on this boatload of student debt to then have it not be kind of a fruitful investment? So it's like it didn't. And again, like the main thing that I really wanted to get out of it was networking, and so it didn't feel like it was going to be worth the squeeze.
Yeah, it's definitely a coin flip. I mean, you could say that about school in general. I think at a higher education, it's definitely a coin.
There's just so many
what you
variables.
make out of it.
Yeah.
And when you talk about networking now as a more seasoned professional, do you do any active kind of networking? Is it through social?
Not a ton, honestly. I'm kind of a very reclusive introvert, and I don't do a ton of networking. If there's like an event here and there, like I'll go out of my way to attend. But usually, I think my one big networking event of the year is like NAB. That is actually a super valuable one for me. And everyone's been telling me to go to Cinegear. I've never been to Cinegear. I'm hoping I can go this year because I usually end up getting booked. But NAB is a huge one for me because I get to meet these manufacturers like face to face. And then even then is a super helpful way in terms of developing a collaboration for YouTube or social content or whatever like that, because I'm actually meeting them and sometimes they'll recognize me. And so that's also super strange that like a lot of like I get stopped at NAB a fair amount just because again our industry is so niche. So it's like more often than not I'm recognized, and so it's helpful when I'm recognized by these brands. So it's like I'm not just asking for a loaner product, or like I'm not just some schmuck that's just asking for like, oh, can I like use these lenses on my short film, which is fine, which is like nothing against that, but like going back to that brand recognition. So whenever I'm getting clients from YouTube, it's like, okay, there's a base level of understanding that like, I'm a working professional, so it's like I've seen your content before, so it's like, yeah, let's do something together.
Kind of a question about everything you just said. I talk about how filmmakers are sort of a one-person business. Like when it comes to the financials of it and insurance and taxes, you're your own marketing agent. You deal with all the client relations. You're a one-man show. So for you, thinking of yourself as this business, as this entity that is your skill set, how do you go about attracting clients, or is it now that your system is built up that they kind of are calling you?
Yeah, I think right for the most part, a lot of it honestly is word of mouth, and like I feel that like for a long time it's solely been word of mouth, and so it's almost leveraging again back to my social content for whether it's YouTube or Instagram, and using that as sort of my marketing tool, and not directly displaying ads saying, "Hey, hire me as a DP." It's more so, "Hey, I'm going to tell you about this filmmaking concept, or I'm going to tell you about this piece of gear. And then just by that association, they'll kind of know me as a DP in Vegas. And so
Okay.
it's kind of, I guess, in a way, I guess more subconscious level marketing. But I just kind of really starting to lean on that socials aspect, especially starting this year, especially since work is so slow. So
Gotcha. For NAB, anything you're particularly excited about or looking forward to?
nothing specific. I have a list. I was meaning to do some research this week on things to check out. I know Aperture just dropped their new high-powered storm light, which is super cool. Nanlux has their 5,000 watt, 5000B, which I've used the 2400B so much in the past couple years. Other than that, I mean, there's like a few new lenses out, but it's more or less the same. What I'm actually really interested in is I have a bone to pick with Sony because they've promised that, well, I wouldn't say they promised us, but they owe us version 2 of the Burano, which we have all been very patiently waiting for. And they announced it a year ago, and they said, okay, yeah, here's version 2. We'll release it March or later. And so many of us were like, what the hell? Like, you're announcing this a year out, and now it's April, and there's firmware nowhere to be found. So I'm definitely gonna pay Sony a visit to have some discussions about that.
Stern conversation.
Stern conversation, like, hey, that or later. Like, to me, it's just like, and I'm making a video on the firmware version 2. It's like, that's such a cop out answer because like when the Murano first came out, there were kind of all these issues and kind of foresights that Sony felt like they didn't really think of, and it felt very version 1 of a camera, and there are these simple things like just having the menu overlays like outside of the frame. It's like this is a Cine Alta camera, but like this definitely does not feel like I paid for one. So
Right.
the community, the Burano community, was very vocal about all these things, and for a while it just seemed like Sony was like very adamant about solving a lot of these issues, but it's like just having March 2025 or later, and I'm
Just
like,
an open-ended.
yeah, like what does that mean? Does that mean December of 2025? So it's like it's super frustrating. But I mean, it's a great camera. It's been my most used camera over the past year, and I'm still a big fan. And it's super interesting because like I also have like an Alexa, and 9 times out of 10, the Burano is just the easier option to pick. And it's like I feel it's like to the point now. I told myself I don't think I would ever sell the Alexa, but like now that's kind of shifting because it's like now my Alexa is just sitting there. And so as much as I would love to use that camera, as much as I love RE ergonomics and image quality, I'm just not using it as much anymore. A few years ago, I would have one job a month that requested an Alexa. Now, again, with the rise of social media, it's like that's all changed.
Okay. Why is it that the Burano seems to be an easier tool for someone that's, I think Ari has such a big name.
Yeah.
And I'm I got to get it. Even clients will know, I got to get an Ari on this job. Why for you as a DP is it an easier tool to maybe use the Burano on most of your work than for someone that doesn't know?
Yeah. So for me, a lot of it just comes down to usability. So it's like if I'm needing to pipe in audio, if I'm having to do audio myself, it's so much easier just to plug a mic in without having to go through a mixer or something like that. And a lot of it has to do, like, it's interesting because a lot of it has to do with the shrinking crew sizes lately. It's like a lot of jobs, a lot of middle class work has just been wiped out. So it's like a lot of times I'm not afforded the luxury of having an AC, or, it just feels like a lot of the crew has just been slashed and cut. So on a lot of those jobs, on a lot of those times where I'm being brought on as a kind of a solo operator, maybe not quite one man band, but like I'm one of one in camera department. It's so much easier to bring that camera out and rely on its autofocus and rely on the audio ports and just not having to think about focus puller And so a lot of people, like sometimes they'll get stuck in their ways, be like, oh no, I have to always use the Alexa. And it's like, okay, now you're kind of opening a can of worms, especially when if you're thinking about shooting in a fast-paced environment. Like I've been on shoots where I've brought on an AC, pulling on the Alexa, and it just was not working out. And the very next shoot, we had gone back. The shoot was at like a gym, and obviously these athletes are moving pretty quickly. The very next time, I was like, okay, I'm sorry, I have to bring the Burano because the autofocus, I can actually, I hate to say this, but I can actually rely on this, using this tool, meaning autofocus. I can rely on this more than having a dedicated focus puller. And that for me is a crazy sentence to say in 2025, but like Sony's like latest autofocus, like she really don't miss. And it's just absolutely, it's absolutely wild. So it's like when I'm, pulling out the 135 and I have an athlete, if I have to shoot wide open and I have an athlete sprinting towards me, I have a 95% guarantee that the whole shot's going to be in focus. It's not going to be like hoping that my first will be able to keep up. And so, not that I'm trying to like eliminate first ACs as like a job position, because if I have the option, like I would totally love to always shoot on PL beautiful lenses. But again, they're just kind of different projects. Sometimes it calls for that, sometimes it doesn't.
Sure.
And so just being able to rely on a lot of the amenities that the Burano gives me and has been super valuable.
When the Burano came out, it was super hyped. And I remember we were talking about it and a couple other people. And then it came out, everyone got it, and it was kind of like deflating.
Yeah, it kind of fell flat.
Yeah.
They had a little bit of a botched release, in my opinion.
For those not familiar, what exactly happened there?
Yeah, there were a few issues that kind of presented itself as the camera came out. It seemed like the camera had some level of IR pollution, and that's its whole other discussion. But there's that. A lot of people were up in arms about the rolling shutter. The menu overlays were like super picky. Like you had to come out of HDMI. Like we do not like us as professionals, we do not like using HDMI. There were a whole lot of weird ergonomic issues, like the viewfinder being sideways with the loop, but then if you wanted to use it as a regular monitor, you had to unscrew it, take the whole viewfinder attachment off, and like it was just like super clunky. And like and also too, like when you have the viewfinder in the right position and it's on the shoulder, like if you're on a wide lens, like the viewfinder is gonna be in the shot, and it's like a lot of these random like ergonomic quirks that were just like, come on, Sony. It's like yeah, we at Sony we gave this camera to ASC DPs and had them test and give us feedback, and I was like, okay, nobody talked about having menu overlays on the outside of your image. It's like it kind of shares that Cine Alta badge and kind of bridges the gap between the FX9, the FX series, and the Venice. And if you're calling this a Cine Alta camera, then it doesn't feel like we're getting Cine Alta features. Things like false color or exposure tools, and I think for me the biggest issue, and still even currently, is the IR pollution. But it's like super, like there's a lot of variables that go into it, and like in my opinion, I feel like it has something to do with heat, because I've seen a lot of people using the variable ND, like on the East Coast, for example, and like they'll use it and it looks totally fine. But then if you use it here or in California, and I've seen this with my own eyes, the sun just be hitting differently out here. So it's like, I think it has something to do with heat, because I see so much IR pollution whenever I'm using the camera out here in the sun. I don't think it's just the level of brightness or intensity of the sun. I think it definitely has something to do with heat, because at the end of the day, like infrared is heat, and that's something that I never really ever noticed with the FX6 and FX9. And I think that was what was so upsetting is that even on their lower tier cameras, like that was never really that much of an issue for me to bring up. And now I'm paying for this camera with a $25,000 price tag, and now having to deal with these issues that I'd never had to before. So it's almost like in a way treating this camera as like a new Red camera. It's because like we had to kind of coddle a lot of those cameras back in the day with IR&Ds and all that stuff. But I think definitely much more usable than a lot of the DSMC2 bodies. But still, it's like it feels very just things that are just make you scratch your head.
Yeah, especially for the price tag.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's just frustrating.
Yeah, I think maybe 20,000 or even maybe a little under sub 20 would have been a little bit more appropriate. It's kind of like when Canon first came out with their C300 series, and because at the time C300s were comparable to FS7s. FS7s were half the price, so everyone got FS7s, and from there, the FS7s became the most popular camera in the world. And it's interesting because I still see a lot of people using FX6s, and I think FX6s are probably one of the most popular cameras in the world. And I see a handful of Muranos now, but again, I've seen a lot of people, and even now, it's like I've heard of stories of people pressing a rental house to prefer an FX6 because of all the media and all the things that they've heard about the Murano. They just don't want to deal with it. So I've heard of them I've heard of stories of people actually, DPs, like just saying, okay, that's fine, just give me an FX6. And so I still think the Murano is a great camera, but I mean, it's the same thing with any tool. It's like you want to learn its limitations and know how it affects your image and thus affects your story.
Yeah, 100%. I think on the same topic, and I believe you have made a video about this because I think I watched it, but there's always that phrase people throw around like gear doesn't matter. And having worked with a ton of gear, I disagree.
Yeah.
How do you balance that, especially with the changing climate where things are aimed at social, budgets are getting lower? Where's the level of gear doesn't matter up until this point?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I always like thinking about it because, like, in a lot of times, like a lot of social content nowadays, a lot of my jobs now are solely based around reels. Like, there have been times where I've brought out the Murano or an Alexa, and then I've been told after the fact by a client who's looking over their shoulder, like, okay, we're only focused on reels. Like, this is only going to show up on reels. I'm like, oh, sick. So it's like, and a lot of times too, like I'm when I am creating reels, it's like it's having a camera that's appropriate for that specific. Like, I'm not going to bring the Alexa out on everything because it's just not the right tool. It's like these are all specific tools that do a specific purpose, and it's like there is no Swiss Army knife that will fit every project, because every project has certain completely wildly different parameters. And so again, just a lot of the social content nowadays, it's like, okay, I need a camera that's I'm able to mount on a gimbal, and it's like I don't necessarily need an Alexa or a Murano, and it's like I have a gimbal for that, but like it's now 3 times the footprint and 3 times the operating power. I need a first AC, I need bigger batteries, and like all of these logistical problems, to whereas like if I could just bring a small camera FX3 A9 on a gimbal, now I'm able to move the camera in ways that I couldn't with an Alexa. So it's like gear does matter, because a lot of these choices creatively kind of do impact how we tell that story. So it's like a lot of these tools, again, they just all serve different purposes.
It's interesting because a lot of the jobs, and maybe it's just Vegas market, but I think it's everywhere. With the shrinking crews, kind of like collecting the kit that makes sense for those jobs starts to become really important, because it's like it's going to be me and 2 people, and we got to have the right tools I'm working the job, and I'm not super stressed or frustrated because it's this crazy thing. Couple of questions before we let you go. When you're as a department head and you're putting together a shoot, how do you go about looking for crew, and what do you look for when you're putting together, hey, I'm going to call so-and-so for this job?
Yeah, that's a really good question. A lot of it has to deal with experience. And so a lot of times when I'm reaching out for specific crew positions, and also given different budgets and scale, like if it's a really big scale, big budget job, it's like I probably want someone that's like pretty dialed in, that I don't really have to kind of coach along the way. So at that point, like I'll get someone who's pretty seasoned. But a lot of times too, like the jobs that are out now are simple 2-camera interviews and stuff like that. So it's like, okay, well, I'm able to get, people on camera department who are maybe maybe not starting out, but definitely have been around the block a few times. So it's really comes down to the specific type of job it is, and then what kind of skill set kind of meets that specific job requirement. So, and also too, like there have been times where I've brought on people who are as a camera utility, as a camera trainee, as they're first getting started. So if I'm bringing on someone like that, it's like I'm not gonna rely on them to focus pull. I'm not gonna rely on them to media manage because they're still learning. So it's like I'm just doing that as a way for one, for me to have an extra hand on a job, but also two, it gives them a learning experience and being around a professional environment. And so it's kind of a really, I guess, symbiotic relationship in that way. So it's like it gives value for me and it also gives value for them. So a lot of it really comes down to experience.
Okay. For those people that you're bringing on maybe as a utility or a PA or camera PA or whatever, for anyone that listens to this that's like, I want to get on a job like that, maybe not necessarily with you, but they're starting their journey, they're trying to get involved in film in this new modern market, what would your advice be to a beginner?
I would say don't be afraid of reaching out. I have people reach out to me like all the time, and I definitely it's super helpful because like there are a lot of times where I'm like, oh man, it would be nice to have an extra pair of hands and stuff like that, and obviously I'll always do what I can to make sure that person is paid in some way or another. Like it may not be a full AC rate, but like while I appreciate them offering their help just to be around, like I definitely want to also take care of them. And I do that with all of my crew, like whether it's the makeup artist, like if I'm being hired from a producer, like, oh, can you also help crew this specific job? And I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. So then I'll crew the job, but then I want to make sure that I'm getting them their rates, what they're asking for, and just taking care of my crew because that way I know down the line in the future, whenever I'm asking and reaching out for availability for another project, it's like, oh yeah, Rob, he usually always gives me great rates, pays on time, blah, blah, blah. Like all the things that are beneficial for being a collaborator in that sense. So it's like for newer people starting out, I always say that like, don't be afraid of like reaching out because as many messages that I may get from people messaging me in that same vein, it's like, usually one or two will kind of fall through the cracks and I'll be like, oh yeah, I have this perfect job coming up. Like if you'd be down to come out and help out. So, I promise I'm not ignoring a bunch of you who may have messaged me that in the past. It's just like, sometimes they just get lost in the message requests. So I would say, don't be afraid to reach out, and not even to me, to anyone that you might follow. Whether it be in Vegas or wherever you're watching this, I would say it's definitely helpful to even just reach out because, again, going back to my big piece of advice just in the first place is just having a good mentor and having someone whose work not only that you look up to, but who you find has good taste. So that's literally all this is. Like all of what we do is completely subjective. So it's like I'm really grateful in that people tend to hire me for my taste, for my creative opinion. And so it's super interesting that I'm like, sometimes it just blows my mind thinking about how people hire me for my creative input. So yeah, I would say don't be afraid to reach out.
How did you go about forming that relationship with your mentor? Was that organic or did you kind of approach?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit of both. I mean, we took their cinematography classes. And so from then it was like kind of inherently put in this like mentor role because like we would shoot these projects and then we would kind of critique them in class. So it's like that kind of just extended throughout my college career. And, no matter what we ended up shooting, whether it was related to the class or not, we would end up bringing them into office hours and like, hey, what do you think of this? What did you think of this project? Or, blah, 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 blah. And so it was also really helpful in just talking about their projects that they were working on in their professional life. So it's like, and dealing with the things that they go through on a professional level. And so hearing that when I was still in college was definitely super helpful. And so I'm glad to say that that relationship has still kind of lasted to this day. So it's like now it's like not necessarily a mentor role, but more of a colleague role, which is kind of really cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think for anybody thinking, how do I get a mentor? It's kind of what you said. It's an easy way is, hey, what do you think of this? Hey, what do you think of this picture I took? What do you think of this shot I got? What do you think of the lighting in this? That gives you this collaborative tool rather than saying like, will you mentor me, please? Like, help me.
Yeah.
Give people something to help you with. Have a topic.
Yeah, because there are people too that I'm friends with on social media that they'll send me frames or they'll send me videos that they've done for other brands. Like, oh, what do you think of the lighting here? What would you have done different? And so, again, going back to like, I don't think that since this whole industry is like super subjective, it's like there's no particularly wrong way to do things, but there might be better ways to do it given story parameters and like what's right for the project. So that's where it's helpful for me to offer my input. Like, oh, this is maybe what I would have done. I really liked what you did here, stuff like that. So it's like sometimes I get a lot of frames on Instagram, and then yeah, if I have time, usually I do. I'll offer some sort of kind of constructive critique on them.
It's definitely more collaborative in that sense. I have two more questions for you. First, what do you think of Vegas market with this film incentive coming in? What do you think that'll do for the market? What do you think that'll do for you?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I kind of I'm honestly kind of a 50-50 kind of person. Like I'm hopeful, but I'm also skeptical at the same time. Only because from what I've seen in my experience, and this already happens like on a commercial level, is that like when bigger jobs are coming in through town, they're just bringing in crews from LA. They're already bringing in department heads, DPs, and usually more often than not, the agency is from LA. So it's like if I'm an agency and or a producer kind of putting together this project for a commercial in Vegas, I'm just going to hit up the people I know who are right down the street in LA and just bring them over. And like that already happens now. And I feel like that's only going to be exacerbated once this studio comes into town. And so, for people like me, I don't know how necessarily beneficial having a studio will be because even now there are a lot of people from LA that are willing to travel down to Vegas and work as a local. Like that already happens now because the industry, especially in LA, is so dead. So you have people that are working, not even from LA. It could be I know people from Kansas City who are literally doing the same thing. They're working here as a local. And it's just, not to be that guy with the pitchfork saying they're taking our jobs, but like, it's super interesting. And that's where the skeptic in me is like, oh, well, like how actually beneficial is this going to be for me? At the same time, I feel like I'm hopeful that it does provide a lot of jobs for a lot of the other departments. Like G&E will probably be good. They're already good. I feel like G&E has never slowed down.
Yeah, they're always busy.
They're always busy. They are more than taken care of. And I feel like the G&E community will honestly probably grow a lot. So it's tough to say at this point. I'm hopeful, but I am also weary that they're just still gonna the projects are gonna be shot here, but what does that crew makeup look like? How much of those crews are actually locals, and how beneficial is it really? So yeah, I'm honestly pretty split.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I've talked to a couple people, Carl Nicoli, who's at On Location, Frequency, and the one thing he pointed out is that there is part of the incentive is you have to use a certain amount of local crew. I think the question that you're raising also is what does that local mix look like? Because how many people just move here, become local, and then
move here.
Yeah,
is the thing is like people like I know so many people who are working here as locals because they're so hungry and starving for work, and they'll claim they're a local. I think one of the bigger movies that I think was shot here last year, I think a lot of people were working here as locals. So again, it's really, yeah, it's tough, especially given the state of the industry. So yeah, to your point, I just don't know.
It remains to be seen. I think it's going to be really interesting, especially in the next 4 to 6 months when they start actually saying if it's going to happen or not. So
Yeah, totally.
a lot to find out. Last question. It's a question I've asked everybody so far. If you could go back and talk to 19-year-old Rob, 22-year-old Rob, whatever it was when you were really getting your start, do you have a piece of advice that you would say to him?
Yeah, I would say that work is not everything, and to definitely prioritize some of your personal relationships. So not really industry related, more so general life advice. I would say to maybe focus on your personal relationships, because at the end of the day, it's like we don't want to be working till we're 90 years old. I mean, I love what I do so much. Like, I certainly would not have an issue with that. But at the same time, it's like we all have a very short amount of time available on this earth. So it's like it doesn't have to all revolve around work. And so I definitely think that I've become a little bit tunnel visioned sometimes, just being so focused on my craft. And I definitely think that focus has definitely helped me get to where I am today. So, again, no regrets. But at the same time, I would also just prioritize life a little bit more and not become so hungry to work, because I do think the grind, there is a cost to the grind, and whether or not that worth it is really up to you.
It's a hard industry to balance, especially if you're very creative and as a freelance when you're always looking for the next gig.
Even tougher when you're a freelancer, because a lot of times we're in survival mode, because we're waiting to get that next job, waiting for the phone to ring, waiting for the season to pick up. Work is now finally starting to pick up for me a little bit, and it's April. And so I haven't really worked December, January, February, March. That's 4 months that I'm just sitting around. So it's like having other avenues like YouTube and other kind of content creation driven things to do has been definitely super helpful. But like, there are stretches where like you just don't work as a freelancer. And so it's really up to you what you do at that time. But yeah, as a freelancer, it is not for the faint of heart.
Incredibly hard to balance, especially too, I think for people like you that are creative, it's hard to turn your brain off, and you're always thinking about, oh, that'd be really, like, even if you're playing a video game or watching something, oh, that would be really cool if we did this for my upcoming project or this next video. It's a really hard thing to shut down.
Yeah. Even when I'm, consuming content, whether it's on YouTube or on TV or whatever, it's like I actually really love watching ads. Like, I love watching commercials and stuff like that, because I love seeing what other people are doing and other ways that they're storytelling. So it's like whenever an ad comes up on YouTube, I'm not pressing the skip button. I'm like, sometimes I'll like see an ad and then I'll write it down so I can reference it later and go back to it. Because I saw something I liked. So that's another thing that might be useful for some people too. It's like, don't be so quick, like, especially like if you're working in the commercial industry, like, don't be so quick to just skip over ads.
Yeah.
Maybe actually like take the time and watch it and see whether or not their storytelling techniques were effective or not in telling that specific story. So it's something super weird quirk that I just love doing, is I actually really love watching ads.
I do the same thing, and people are like, why are you watching this toilet paper commercial so intense? I'm like, because I'm curious how they made this commercial. Thank you very much. But I think people in our industry are the only ones that probably do that, but you can learn a ton from that stuff.
Yeah, it's like this commercial I'm being served has now become R&D, and it's like, especially if you think about commercials, like, we've seen basically everything there is to see. So like, at this point, if you're doing a commercial, it has to like really stand out. And same thing with social media and YouTube. It's like you have to really hook the audience to make them pay attention to watch this Toyota ad. So it's like, what is this Toyota ad really doing to really capture my engagement and capture my retention? And so I think there's a lot to be learned with a lot of the ads that are currently out right now.
Yeah. Constant learning process. I think there's always stuff coming out. But cool, man. I won't take any more of your time. I really appreciate you sitting down. I
Yeah,
feel like we
totally.
could go for like 3 hours, but
Yeah,
we're trying to keep them to like an hour if we can.
yeah, no worries. I don't
But
know how long this one was, but
yeah,
it's yeah, these are always super fun.
yeah, this was awesome. We'll have to have you back. For the video, if you could, anything you want to plug, your YouTube, where people can find you.
So you can find me on Instagram at instagram.com/Rob or via YouTube. It's just my name, Robert Machado.
Right on, man. Thank you.